Hi, I'm Colette Patt. I direct the diversity programs in the mathematical and physical sciences at Berkeley. And I'm very happy to be talking to you today about how to fund your way through your graduate studies in the mathematical, physical, biological sciences, computer sciences, and engineering. I want to say a particular word of encouragement to the LSAMP students. The LSAMP is a fantastic program, and we're always delighted to have LSAMP students at Berkeley. I have a few important words of advice, things I hope that you will remember from this particular webinar, and I'm going to start with those. The first and most important message that I'd like you to walk away from this with is that your way through graduate school will be paid. Neither you nor your family need to pay for your graduate education, either your master's degree or your doctoral studies. So if you're concerned about money, you can stop being concerned about it right now, because graduate students in the science, math, and engineering fields, and also the behavioral sciences and economics, have their way paid through graduate school by and large through a number of different sources of support, all of which you are going to be eligible for. In terms of how best to fund your graduate education, my recommendation is that you find a package of different kinds of support that will give you the best kind of funding for each stage of your graduate career. So some people believe that the best source of financial support is fellowship throughout. Fellowship is indeed free money. It's money that's awarded to you simply to do your studies and do your research and make your way through graduate school. But for some people, that is the ideal situation, to have fellowship for all 4 to 7 years of graduate study. But my recommendation for most people is to get a package that allows you support from different sources. And I will explain what those sources are. I don't want to de-emphasize the importance of fellowships. In fact, I want to make sure that you do apply for fellowships. They're very, very important. They're prizes and awards, and they're an incredible source of funding. And you will be eligible for them, and you will be competitive for them, so you should apply for them. But it's not necessarily the case that you need to have fellowship support throughout in order to be funded through graduate school. So what are the sources of financial support for students at the graduate level? I'm going to focus primarily on the PhD level, but for those of you who are interested in master's programs, you will find the sources of support for master's students embedded in this webinar as well. The different sources of support are extramural fellowships, such as the National Science Foundation's Graduate Research Fellowship Program, and I will explain a little bit about that and other sources of fellowship support as we go along in this webinar. Graduate student research assistantships, and many graduate students, perhaps most graduate students, particularly at the PhD level, are funded at some point in their graduate studies through research assistantships, where they are being supported either to conduct their own research or to work on a research project with a faculty mentor and a principal investigator on a major grant. Another source of funding is graduate student instructorships, or teaching assistantships, they're sometimes called. These are jobs where students work as teachers to undergraduates usually, and they are supported in doing that for their own graduate study. In addition to those sources, there are university-funded fellowships. These are generally awarded by the department or the university that you're going into, and they are forms of institutional support that you will be nominated for when you apply to a department to do your graduate studies there. There are also federally funded sources of support that go directly to departments, and these are from the Department of Education, the National Science Foundation, the Department of Energy, NASA, many different federal agencies and private foundations support departments so that they in turn can support their graduate students. And again, these are sources of support that will be awarded to you by the department when you apply for graduate study at that department. In addition to that, some students will make money by grading undergraduate exams and papers, by tutoring, by other kinds of teaching. Some graduate students like to teach off campus at other kinds of institutions, community colleges, and so on. And some, in some fields, will make money consulting. Those are all ways that you can earn extra money. Usually, they're not the fundamental sources of graduate student support, or the primary sources of graduate student support. In terms of what kind of value the primary sources of graduate student support have, how much they fund, and how much money you'll walk away with to support your graduate education, I will explain the different sources and what their value is. University fellowships, fellowships that are awarded by the particular university that you enroll in, usually will award you about $20,000 to $25,000 a year, usually about that amount, and that's just the stipend. And then in addition, your fees and tuition will be paid by the university for you. So you still walk away with the $25,000 at the end of the year in your pocket. Federal awards to departments that are then awarded to you in the form of fellowship or other kinds of teaching awards will be about the same amount, $20,000 to $35,000, depending on the source of the funding, the federal agency, the particular program, and so on. Graduate student researchers usually make about in the same range, $20,000 to $35,000. And again, in all of these situations, your fees and tuition also will be paid for you. You will not have to take your fees and tuition out of the award that you receive, the stipend award. And then, again, graduate student instructorships or teaching assistantships also pay around the same amount, depending on the institution, the department, the years of experience that you have as a graduate student instructor. So those are the main sources of graduate student support in the sciences, math, engineering, social and behavioral sciences. And those are the kinds of support that are going to see you through your years of graduate school. I should add that when you teach or are a researcher on somebody else's grant, but particularly when you teach, it's considered essentially a half-time job. So you still have time to do that and do your graduate studies. And for many people, that's a very important source of support. It's one of the main sources of support for graduate students in doctoral programs. And it's a very valuable kind of support, because when you get done with your graduate degree, when you're done with your PhD, what most people want to do is go out and become researchers, go out and become faculty at different kinds of institutions. And you want to be sure that when you take your first job as a postdoc and have to teach, or your first faculty job and have to teach, that isn't your first time in the classroom, that you've actually had some experience teaching as a graduate student. And so teaching assistantships are a very important way both to help you fund your way through graduate school and to give you a form of professional development that's very important for you ultimately in your career as a scientist or engineer. I'm going to turn your attention and mine to fellowships. Fellowships are sources of support, and I'm going to discuss here extramural fellowships, or the fellowships that you will seek, that you will apply for your pre-doctoral studies, which are the initial years of your doctoral studies through federal agencies. As you progress through your doctoral studies, there will be other sources of fellowship, which I'm not going to explain in this webinar, but come from some of these same agencies to support students in their dissertation years and then thereafter in their postdoctoral years. For now, in this webinar, I'm going to focus on the extramural sources of support, the fellowships available for your first 3 years of graduate study, or sometimes your first 5 years or 6 years of graduate study. So, turning our attention to these, I'm going to go through the major sources of fellowships for students in the science, math, and engineering fields. I'd like to just say along these lines that one of the problems with looking for fellowships, and you may encounter this, or you may already have encountered this as you've gone about looking for fellowships, is that there are many lists of fellowships available. And there are lists of fellowships available. The problem isn't that there's too little information. The problem is that there's often an overwhelming amount of information. So this webinar is not intended to tell you all the sources of fellowship. If among the sources that I explained to you, there isn't anything that you feel is suitable for you, please do your own research. Go to those lists, look at the lists of lists, and go through all those lists and figure out what will be most beneficial to you. There's much more out there than what I'm going to explain in this webinar, but I'm focusing on those fellowships that are the main sources for graduate students in the science, math, and engineering fields. So, the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship, that's a 3-year fellowship, $30,000 per year stipend, plus your tuition and fees are paid for you. So you walk away with that $30,000 in your pocket, minus taxes. The IRS will want to tax you on it, but minus your taxes in your usual tax bracket. The Ford Fellowship, $20,000 for each year for 3 years. The National Physical Sciences Consortium, $20,000 for 2 to 6 years. Each year, $20,000 for 2 to 6 years. The Department of Energy Office of Science Fellowship, a $35,000 a year fellowship for 3 years. Plus, as with all these fellowships, your tuition and fees are paid. The NASA Fellowship, again, $35,000 to support you through your master's or your PhD program if you're doing work in a NASA-oriented area of science, math, or engineering. The National Defense Fellowship, again, $30,000 to $31,000 plus fellowship of fees. The GEM Consortium for master's students, $10,000 a year. For PhD students, $14,000 a year. And then for those of you who will decide to go overseas and do your studies, or for those of you who will decide that you want to go into fields that are not in science, math, or engineering, please look into the Marshall, the Rhodes, the Churchill, the Ford, and the Javits. Those tend to support students sometimes in science, math, and engineering, and certainly outside of those fields. I want to make special mention of a couple fellowships that you should look into for those of you particularly interested in master's study. The GEM Consortium, the NASA, the National Physical Science Consortium, the Department of Energy are very important sources of funding for master's students. For those of you who are new Americans, look for the Soros Foundation Fellowship. And for those of you who are international students, and who are women, the AAUW, the American Association of University Women, has a fellowship for both master's and doctoral students who are non-US citizens and who are women. The other sources of fellowship funding generally are restricted, the ones that I mentioned generally are restricted to US citizens and domestic residents. How do you apply for these sources of funding? The institutional awards, the awards that are given to you by your department or by your institution, are based on need, and they're based on merit as you express your merit and your need in your graduate application. To determine your need, the institution will look at your FAFSA. Please fill out the FAFSA when you apply to graduate school. The extramural awards, the NSF, the Department of Energy, the Ford, the Hertz, all of those fellowships need to be applied for separately. You apply for each one separately. The applications are online. The parts of the application are similar to the parts of the application required for graduate admission, and the timeline for applying is the same as the timeline for applying for graduate admission. Some of the fellowships have deadlines that are a little earlier, so be ready to apply for them make sure that you've checked out the deadlines. Some of them are as early as October. A good rule of thumb applying for fellowships is apply for everything for which you are eligible. So, as you can tell, that's a fairly long list of just the ones that I mentioned, and then perhaps some others that you might find on your own. You need to prepare for this well in advance. When do you start working on this? When are these applications due? They're due a year before you start graduate school. So if you're in your senior year, you should be starting to work on these, really at the beginning of your senior year at least. Why would you bother to apply for those extramural fellowships? I told you that there are many sources of support that will come to you from the department that you're admitted into and from the school that you go to, the graduate school that you go to. So why would you apply for those extramural fellowships? And I do encourage you to do that. You would apply for them because they are extraordinary prizes. They recognize your early achievement and your early accomplishments and your early promise. They will remain on your CV as your first major award as a scientist or engineer, even after you go win your Fields Medal or your Nobel Prize. They're portable, and they give you the freedom to decide where to go to graduate school. So even if you get an offer that isn't that great from a school that you really want to go to, you will have this extramural award that will make the offer that the school gives you not as important, and you can still go where you want. They often give you special opportunities, so you can join a lab, for example, in your second year or your third year, even if the advisor doesn't have funding for you at that moment, because you have your own extramural award that you bring with you, your own fellowship. As you start your graduate studies, if you have some prep work that you still need to do, some courses you didn't take, or some advanced level courses that you want to take to prepare yourself particularly to go on in a certain area, and you need a little extra time for that, you have the funding to support you in those early years of preparation. And that's a common situation. Students come from lots of different undergraduate backgrounds with different kinds of training, and often need to prepare in certain areas where they weren't prepared as undergraduates at their home institution. So if that's the case where you go to graduate school and that's your situation, having that extramural support, those fellowships your own fellowship that you brought with you will really help you to be able to take a little extra time and not be dependent on making your way through graduate school at the pace that the department requires to keep funding you with the years of support that they have available to you. You can also augment your fellowship. So if you bring an NSF or you bring a DOE fellowship with you, or a Ford or Hertz fellowship with you, you can augment them with teaching and summer work. So in the end, you can land up making quite a bit more money even than the fellowship if you choose to. So in advising you about the ideal funding package and how to look at the offers that are made to you from various schools, and how to think about what kind of funding will be best suited to supporting your graduate training, here are a few words of advice. The way that you're funded, whether you have fellowship that gives you time to focus exclusively on coursework, whether you have teaching assistantships that put you into the classroom teaching students and working usually with other graduate students and faculty, learning how to teach, whether you work on somebody else's research for a while or are funded to do your own research and when, depends a lot on where that funding occurs in your graduate education. Should relate well to and fit well with who you are as a scholar. So that will have to do with your own preparation as an undergraduate, your social style, whether it's helpful for you to teach so that you can be in dynamic interaction and social interaction with other graduate students. If you're already an extroverted and outgoing person, that may be less important to you. But if you're a little shy or a little introverted, it might be helpful to have teaching support, to have a teaching assistantship very early in your graduate training so that you can get to work with other people and sort of be required to work with other people in a team and get to know the graduate students. Your own learning style, the field that you're in. Some fields really, you do need to be in research right away. Others, you need to spend a little more time on your purely academic work. So evaluate your financial packages and your offers and what you have available to you and what kind of funding, how you want to spread out your funding based on how you learn, what your preparation is like, what kind of person you are, and how that funding will fit best with your progress through a graduate program. As I said, you don't need to just have fellowship. Having some fellowship is great. It's regardless, your way will be paid. So having fellowship is a really nice plus, and it's advantageous. But teaching support, getting your funding by teaching, getting your funding by doing research, either a faculty member's research or your own, those are all perfectly adequate and good ways to get funded through graduate school. As I said, it is important to teach along the way, so even if you do get fellowship, make sure to take the time to teach somewhere along the way in your graduate training. If you can get funded by your faculty advisor to work with them on their research and your research is a part of it, do take advantage of that opportunity, because that will yield you a lot of attention from your faculty advisor, and faculty tend to be they tend to pay the right kind of attention when somebody is working on their own research project to making sure that the student is learning the research skills they need to learn and producing the results they need to produce at the right pace. So that kind of research assistantship is actually very, very helpful to most graduate students. If you get an opportunity to have one of those, go for it. There are some kinds of awards that you might be offered, like a Vigor or an IGERT, a GAN fellowship, that sometimes give you access to certain kinds of professional development opportunities or training or an interdisciplinary group of scientists in your field. And those are sometimes really wonderful opportunities. So if you get offered those, think carefully about it. Sometimes it's not just the money that's the award, it's also all the related benefits that you get from that kind of funding. And those sources of funding usually are awarded by the department. So when you apply for graduate school and when you get your offers from graduate departments, ask them whether they have any of those kinds of awards. And they're usually big interdisciplinary projects that are funded in the department or for particular faculty that you can become a part of as a graduate student, and that you can be both supported by and join in the project and the community of the project by being on board with it and being funded through that award. So the bottom line on winning fellowships and the bottom line on making sure that you're properly funded for graduate study is apply for everything for which you're eligible. If you go after those extramural awards, the NSF, the Department of Energy, the Department of Defense awards, the Hertz, the Ford, do go after them. And when you go after them, apply for everything that you have time to apply for and for which you're eligible. All the money will come out green when you withdraw it from your bank account. Most fellowships can be deferred if you need to defer them and taken sequentially. They can't be taken simultaneously, but if you win more than one fellowship, you can often defer one while you take the other, and in that way you have fellowship support. You can have fellowship support sometimes for the entire duration of your graduate studies if you wish. You can teach on top of that, and I do recommend that you teach, as I said. Whether you get these extramural sources of fellowship support or not, you will be made an offer by the graduate schools to which you are admitted. You will be made an offer of financial support that should be sufficient to see you through your entire doctoral studies, so all the years of your doctoral studies. And that money will come to you from the institution, from federal agencies, from private foundations. You do not need to fund your own way through graduate school in the sciences, math, and engineering. That's very important to remember. So if you don't have if you don't have a trust account, if your family isn't wealthy, then you are in the perfect position to apply for graduate school. Most graduate students do not have trust accounts, do not have wealthy families, and they make their way through graduate school being funded by the institutions that admit them and that they go to, and being funded by federal agencies and private foundations. And that's the way to do it. So you do not need to have your own financial resources to fund your way through graduate school. When you get offers from different institutions, evaluate those offers very carefully and decide which of those offers is going to be most conducive to your success. What kind of funding package is going to be most conducive to your success? Don't worry if the dollar amount is a little higher here or there. Go to the place that will give you the best graduate education that you can possibly have. You'll more than make up a few $1,000s difference after you get your PhD. Go to the best place you can for your graduate studies. Just make sure that the financial offer is enough to see you through the years of your graduate study, enough to get you your housing, to pay for your housing, to pay for your food, to pay for your clothes, your books, your computer, your basic necessities. You won't get rich in graduate school, but you will be funded. Good luck.